In this lesson, I'm going to show you how to create prefabs for obstacles and plants. Alright, so let's get started with this. What we'll want to do is we'll want to create a brand new quad. And so I'm going to select this corner piece and hit F on the keyboard just to frame in on that, and go to Game Object and Create Other and Quad. And you'll notice that it creates it right at 0, 0, and 0. Now with this, we want to rotate it 90 degrees on the X, and then we'll raise it up off of the track by, let's say, 0.1. Okay, and we might even go a little bit further than that. And let's do 0.25. Okay, and actually it's going to be, oh, I'm rotating it. Sorry about that. Didn't realize that I was doing that. So let's do 0 on this one, and let's say 0.1. Okay, so that way it's just raised up off of the track. Okay, so now that we have this quad, let's call this a barrier. And the barrier is going to have our barrier material. So we're going to do it the exact same way that we did with these track materials. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and create, or excuse me, let's duplicate, so Control D, and let's call this barrier, and let's just remove it. So we'll call this barrier underscore MAT, and then that barrier is going to be right up in here on the sprite sheet. So you may have to do just a little bit of work trying to figure out where that's at. So here on the bottom row, that's 0.25, and then our 0, and this is 0.125, 2.5, 375, 5.0, and then 625. Okay, so on our Y, we're going to do 0.625, and then we're going to go over to 0.25, 0.375, 0.5. Okay. And there you can see that we have the barrier pieces. Let's go ahead and drag and drop that onto our quad, and you'll see that it gives us a nice little texture there for these rock pieces. And these are going to fit nicely right on our track. So now that we have that set, we need to create a prefab for it. Now before we can do that, we need to make sure that we reset this mesh collider with a box collider. And with the box collider, we'll replace it, and then we're going to reset its size. So on this one, let's do 0.25. And actually, you know what, let's do 0.5, as I don't want anything to just run up over the top of these. And then we need to make that a little bit smaller in the Y direction here. So in the Y, let's do, I believe, maybe 0.25. Now we want to make sure that we get this set to the texture itself. So what I like to do is I like to go to the top view by clicking on the Y axis, and then click on the square to make sure that we're in the isometric view. And this is going to give you a straight-on view of that object. Now that's not quite high enough. Let's go to 0.3, 3.5, and let's just go to 0.4. There we go. So that's going to give us a good set on our box collision there. So let's click on the box again. It's going to take us back to our perspective view, and then we're going to hit F to frame on that object again. Now let's make sure that this is set as a prefab. So let's go to our prefabs folder. We're going to right click, create prefab, and we're going to call this PFB underscore barrier. All right, great. Now let's take this and let's rename it, and let's just put PFB underscore at the beginning of that, and then we're going to drag and drop that right onto our prefab. And now that's been set. Now we're starting to get a long list of objects in the scene. So I want to organize this by creating a game object in the scene. So I'm going to go to Game Object, Create Empty, and let's zero out its position. And this game object I'm going to call Track. Let's select all of the prefab track pieces. So select the first one in the list, and then drag all the way down to the bottom and hold Shift, and then left click the bottom one. And then we're going to take this, we're going to left click and hold and drag that onto the track object. And you'll see that that is now organized in that game object. Now we can do the same thing for our barrier. This one I'm going to call, I'm going to create empty, make sure that we zero this one out as well. And for this one, I'm going to call this obstacles. Okay. and then drag and drop the barrier on that, and then we're ready to go. Now this particular object, what I want to do is I want to move it up into this area where the road comes together. Now I don't want the player to be able to just drive on through any of these pieces. I want them to go around as they should. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a barrier here. And we're just going to place that right in that area. Now again, if it helps, you can go to the top view, and this could help you out with your work. Okay. Now the obstacles, I grabbed the wrong object. Let's go ahead and take the PFB barrier, or the obstacles object, and let's set that to 0, 0, and 0. I needed to grab the PFB barrier object and then move it into position. So now let's go ahead and grab that right here. And let's put this into position. Let me go to my isometric view. Okay, there we go. And then now we have this into position. So here I can put it right along this line of grass that separates the two roads. And that'll be good. We want to hit Control D to duplicate that, and then hold Control, and just continue to duplicate these as we go along. Now you don't have to put all of these end to end. You could probably get away with just doing every other one, but for right now I'm just going to do end to end. Okay. Now with all of those barriers, I'm going to move those back just a little bit off of that edge there. Okay. Okay, so now that we have that, we could take those same ones, we can hit Control D, duplicate those, and then while still holding Control, we can snap those into position on this side. Just make things go a little faster. So those are all the barriers that I'm going to create for right now. I want to show you how to create a prefab for the plants and the trees, so that way you can get started in detailing your level if you want to do that. So the first thing that I want to do is I'm going to create a duplicate of this prefab right here. So with this prefab, I'm going to hit Control D, and I'm going to give it a different name. We're going to call this plant. And with this, I'm going to drag and drop it into the scene. Now once you drag it into the scene, you can start to modify it and then apply that instance of it. So instead of using the rock barrier material, let's use a plant material. So I'm going to take this material, hit Control D, and let's call this plant underscore mat. And then let's change the positioning of this, and it's going to be 1 to the left in the X. So take 0.5 and subtract 0.125, and you're going to get 0.375. And then all we have to do is drag and drop that onto this new object, and there we go. Now let's select that PFB plant object, and let's adjust its box collider. And let's also make sure that this is set to a trigger, as I don't really want the player to collide with this. Now if I really wanted to, I could remove that collider altogether. But if you want the plant to have an effect on the player in any way, let's say that if they run over it, it slows them down or something like that, you'll want to have that collider. I don't want to do that, so I'm just going to go ahead and remove the component as it's not needed. So now that we have this for our plant, we already have that set as a prefab. All we have to do is hit Apply. Okay. So now that that has been applied, we can go to our prefabs, and you'll see that that is updated there in your icon. So now I can just come in and I can start to spread these around my level. So hitting Control D and just kind of spread those out in different places throughout the level itself. Now you don't want to get too carried away with it. Okay, you want to make sure that you're following along with some level design guidelines, if you will. Little plants like these, they're a great touch, but if you get too out of hand with them, they can take over and become very distracting. So just kind of spread them out here and there throughout the level. Okay, so just hitting Control D and placing those out. Now remember, with these plants, now that we have a long list of these plants going, we want to go ahead and we want to put those into their own game object. Okay, so I'm going to do that now by selecting the first plant here and selecting the last. But first we need to create the game object that's going to hold those. So let's go to game object, create empty. Let's zero it out so that way we know exactly where it's going to be. And let's say plants. Take all those plants, drag and drop those into the plant object, and there we go. We're staying nice and organized. Now at this point, you can do the exact same thing to create your tree objects. Now the trees are going to be a little bit different. The trees, you're going to have to create a box collider for those, and you're going to have to size that up and get these trees into the proper place. Now it's not relevant to this particular course. Maybe in the next series I'll show you how to create those trees if you want to know that exactly, but it's not absolutely relative. There's no reason to take another lesson to do something like that. Now what we are going to do in the next lesson is create the player prefab.